Okay, now the tables have turned. We now have Mme Sophie Mokoena, international news editor at the SABC. She's definitely someone you always see on your screens, and we're having a coffee with her, talking all things governance, peace and security on the African continent. Mama, thank you so much for agreeing to have this conversation with us.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Mama, the continent has a lot of flashpoints of violence, conflict. Do you think the African Union is doing enough to stop the conflict in Sudan, in Eastern DRC, in the Sahel, in Mozambique? Do you think enough is being done?
I don't think so, and I'll tell you why. In recent times, the African Union has been slow in taking decisions to try and deal with these kinds of challenges. I think the issue here is to respond to early warning systems on time to avert these kinds of problems. And therefore, I am not convinced that the Peace and Security Council in particular is doing that. I think when there were reforms within the African Union, some of the agencies or institutions were merged, and therefore that took away the strength and the focus of such institutions. Because when you merge certain institutions and agencies, you have to also merge the responsibilities. And therefore, you might be distracted in terms of the focus of what this institution or the agency was supposed to do. And I think the African Union has to really look at whether these institutions, after those reforms were implemented, are they strong enough in terms of their mandates? We have to relook at restructuring those institutions. And look, some few years back, it was like we're getting it right. Number of conflict really going down. But now you have these hotspots, a very stubborn hotspots. Previously, even though there were challenges, the continent was able to address those challenges timelessly. But now look at what's happening in Sudan, what's happening in the DRC, and we are now talking about South Sudan. So I think there's a lot that can be done. I don't even want to talk about the Sahel region, because yes, the Constitutive Act indicates that countries that have experienced coups must be suspended. But you have to immediately start a process to ensure that you assist those countries to go to elections so that you can bring them back. Nobody is doing that with the Sahel region. And now those countries are continuing. They've even left the regional body, ECOWAS. And therefore you can't have a situation where a portion of Africa is not part of the entire African continent.
So I think I totally agree with you, and everyone that has been commenting is saying, yes, there's early warning, but there's no early action. What do you think should be the early action? What strategies can be put in place for early action? Do you think institutions such as the African peer review mechanism have a role in early action?
The African peer review mechanism always brings forth the early warning systems. But like I'm saying, then you have other agencies who must act timelessly. Because when the APRM is visiting countries, they do get information on the ground, and they can see that this country is restless, something is brewing. But then the responsibility of the APRM is not to manage conflicts and all of that. So those institutions that are supposed to then look at the report and implement the recommendation of the report in terms of early warning systems, they don't do that.
I see. Well, young people on the continent have been very restless. We saw protests, Gen Z protests in Kenya. Do you think on the continent we're going to see a continuation of these violent uprisings, and what can be done to get young people to actually start participating formally in these governance processes and to let them start engaging their governments positively other than being violent? What can be the strategies that can be put into place? Because a number of listeners here are young people and they're very interested in this topic of peace and security.
I don't think young people on the continent are violent.
Okay.
They are restless.
They're restless.
And the response from member states in terms of the security apparatus, that's what makes a situation to be volatile.
Okay.
Because how the security personnel responds to those protests, sometimes they are very, very harsh and brutal. And therefore, that leads to a situation where you have violence. Take, for an example, the protest in Kenya. We saw what happened. Cameras were there. They were capturing the action. And therefore, I think the issue of leaders not accepting the fact that their citizens have a right to protest peacefully is a problem. You can't clamp down on dissent. You have to create space for engagement. And if you engage properly, you can avert and avoid such situations. I really totally disagree that young people on the continent are violent. It is how you respond to protest, to program of action, to their anger and frustration. And the anger and frustration from young people is justified. The continent is the youngest in terms of population. They are not working. They want to be like me and you. They want to sit like this. You know, we are both at work. They want to work. And therefore, we have to understand that you have a youngest population that is not working, and this is a ticking bomb.
Now, when it comes to geopolitics, there are a lot of shifts. We've seen a lot of tariffs. I think almost 50 out of the 54 African countries have been hit by tariffs. What's your say? Do you think with these tariffs that are coming into place, it's a good opportunity to bring in the African Continental Free Trade Agreement and for African governments to take it seriously more than ever now? I just want to get your views on that.
You are correct. This is a moment of reflection in terms of we as the continent, what we have been doing. I wrote earlier on Twitter responding to somebody that the SADC region only issued a statement today, but this thing has been going on for days. And one member country, South Africa, is under siege, and now you have other countries. And you know that the economy of SADC, you know, South Africa carries that nerve center of the economy of SADC. And therefore, if South Africa can be paralyzed, the whole region is going to be paralyzed. But they were slow to respond. I expect SADC to have called an urgent meeting, virtual, of ministers of trade and industry to say, hang on, let's see, member countries are affected. What are we going to do? How do we cushion our member countries to support them so that their economies don't collapse? And what can we learn from each other? It's not happening.
That's true.
I don't even want to talk about the African Union because I expect the African Union to do the same, to call an emergency meeting of ministers of trade and industry to look at this issue. How is it going to affect the continent? Because it will affect the continent. We have these problems of conflicts in different areas. Already the economy is affected and you can't afford this. You look at what economists are saying, the United States of America, they equate this to the Great Depression. They equate this to the financial crisis of 2007 and 2008. And we know what happened during that time. There was a quick reaction by global community. Let's take COVID. They equated to COVID. We know what happened. South Africa was leading the charge to bring together African countries to deal with the issue of COVID. It was a united force. What's happening now? Why are we not seeing the same action? And this is a moment where we can strengthen that continental free trade area so that we continue to do business amongst ourselves. We are fine. We discuss how do we go to a particular region as a group. How do we trade with European Union as a group because they are a group? How do we trade with Asia, China as a group? Because South Africa's economy and the GDP and the strength cannot wrestle a country like China.
That's true.
Or EU. But if we are united, we can be able to have better trade deals.
Mama, as you are aware, the African Union Commission has new leadership. You have engaged the leadership over a number of years. At times, positive criticism. What kind of advice would you give this new leadership as this take on the helm of Africa? What should they be focused on? What are some of the mistakes that were made by previous leaders that they shouldn't make?
The Commission can be as strong as the Assembly.
Okay.
If the heads of state and government don't take the African Union seriously, there's no way a commissioner can be effective. And therefore, I think what we have to do as the continent is to demand that our leaders must take the African Union seriously. Particularly this crisis provides an opportunity to us to say, you see, if you are not united, you are going to be weakened. For example, European Union is now negotiating with President Trump as a bloc. It's not country to country, it's a bloc. And he will have to think twice when he's approaching European Union. He will be arrogant, that's his nature. But he will think twice because he needs the European Union. Those are American friends. So even China will continue to abuse certain countries, smaller ones, if we don't come together as a continent and negotiate as a bloc. 2 billion people, who can ignore that population, that GDP? No one. But with South Africa, 60 million, and you're going to negotiate with China with 2 billion people, India. Yes, America, 200 million, Russia, 100. So you have to agree as a continent that for now we need
each other
more than
ever.
before.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, Mama, the APRM is celebrating 22 years of existence. There have been critiques. It went through a lull at some point. It came back. It has a new CEO now. What kind of message would you send out to all the stakeholders in the APRM process as they part towards the future for the next decade as far as governance is concerned on the continent?
My message will be directed to the commissioner, who is the CEO of the African Union, and you have all these agencies. to ensure that he constantly support the agencies. And the heads of state and government must also support all these agencies. The reports that are being presented to countries must implement the recommendations to make sure that this agency or this institution is respected. And if you get ignored, your morale will be down and it will just be, okay, let me do my job. But if you make recommendations, they are taken seriously. You will see if Africa can implement the recommendations of the African peer review mechanism in relation to countries, we won't have challenges that we have, particularly as it relates to the civil unrest and discontent among the citizens of this continent.
Mama, we are very honored and very grateful that you gave us a bit of your time to have a very candid conversation.
And thank you for...
Thank you, Mama, so much. I really appreciate you coming.
Thank you.
We hope to have you again for other conversations that have to do with governance on the continent. We're having a conversation with Mama, and Mama Sophie is well respected. She's one of the leading journalists on the continent, always speaking truth to power, engaging African leaders, ordinary African people on all issues that have to do with governance, peace and security. So we decided to have a chat with her. Again, please tell us what you think. Give us your views if you agree or disagree with some of the analysis. Until we see you again, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.